Okay, so now I'm going to talk about slides 10 and 11 for the ecosystem project. They're called threats and interventions. So slide 10 is going to be on threats to your ecosystem, and slide 11 is on interventions. The requirements are listed here on Google Classroom. Slide number 10, you need the heading, which is threats to the name of your ecosystem. And then I want you to describe 3 major threats your ecosystem faces. And I want you to use language taught in week 6. So I'm going to jump down to week 6. So when you're making this slide, I want to see words that were taught within this week for the ecosystems. Particularly, look at lesson 6.02 here, naming the threats. For naming the threats, there was a document there that some of you completed where I have this terminology that I was hoping that you would learn that week. So habitat destruction, pollution, deforestation, eutrophication, overfishing or overharvesting, illegal hunting or wildlife trade, and climate change. So these are some of the terminologies I expect you to use when you create the slide on threats. You can also use the term invasive species if that's one of the threats to your ecosystem. And then if as a result of the threats you have some species that are endangered or threatened or species of special concern, there was a lesson on that as well. So you can use that language. Extirpated was also a word that was in that lesson, and just in the Serengeti grasslands, which is what my project is on, there were quite a few examples of extirpated species. So anyway, back to the slide requirements. You have to describe 3 major threats to your ecosystem, but use that language that I just reviewed from week 6. Then provide at least one picture relevant to one of the threats. And in the speaker notes, provide the links to the websites you used. That's slide 10. And then slide 11 is going to be on interventions. So your heading will be interventions. So this is the efforts that humans are doing or undertaking to try to help this ecosystem or to protect this ecosystem against the threats that you just talked about. Now the interventions that you list, they don't have to match the 3 threats that you chose. Okay, sometimes it's hard to find that. Your 3 interventions can be targeting different threats. Okay, so describe 3 interventions, provide at least one picture that's relevant to one of the interventions, and in the speaker notes, provide the links to the websites used. So there's a rubric worth 18 points that you can click on that tells you all the point values for each slide and how to get maximum points. I'll let you look at that on your own. This time, for this video, I already made the slides. Okay, so I'm not really gonna have the whole video on making them. So I made the slides and I'll show you that they satisfy the requirements. First of all, this slide, I need to adjust the title. The title or heading should be threats to, and then the name of your ecosystem. So mine will be the Serengeti grasslands. Okay, so I did a bunch of research and I found 3 threats. Now, when you're researching, some of you will be in luck if the WWF, that's the World Wildlife Fund, has kind of targeted your ecosystem in one of their web pages, then you're in good luck here. Okay, so I'm in luck because the WWF has a web page on the Serengeti. And a lot of their web pages on these ecosystems are set up the same way. And if I scroll down a little bit, I see these categories here. One of the categories is challenges. Challenges sound like threats to the ecosystem. Okay, so I can click here and go through and get a bunch of the threats, and all my information can be from this website. And another section that the WWF has on their web pages is how we're helping. So those would be interventions. Okay, so those of you who have chosen a topic that the WWF has also kind of targeted and made a web page for, you are in luck. So I'm going to click on challenges to show you what that looks like. So here's a general description: challenges affecting the Mau Mara Serengeti. And if I scroll down a little bit more, these pictures here at the bottom, they're all each a different threat. So there's 5 to choose from here. Okay. Yeah, I got 5 threats I can choose from. So illegal wildlife trade, I think I chose that one. Community development, like humans building things nearby, is a threat. I think I chose that one as well. Then I'll scroll back up. I can click on how we're helping. It'll take me down to these different ways on they're helping. So looks like there's 3 options here: better land management, rehoming rhinos. I talked about that in my slideshow actually. And then working on water flows. I didn't talk about that one in my slideshow, but that could have been one I talked about. So yeah, the WWF is a good resource if it focused on your topic. So the ones I chose for my threats, you have to pick 3. So habitat destruction is a clear one. And that's probably going to be one for most ecosystems, I would say. Like, humans are expanding all over the earth, and they're going to have to, they affect natural habitats as they do so. So I talked about how increased farming activity can pollute the ecosystem nearby and also alter the water levels of the ecosystem nearby. And also building roads damages the ecosystem as well, especially for a place like the Serengeti, where lots of animals migrate across the ecosystem. So if you build a road across it, it's going to affect the migration. I talked about poaching in mine. Okay, many animals in the Serengeti are hunted illegally. And I talked about diseases as well. Okay, so sometimes humans own pets. The humans are living nearby the ecosystem, and sometimes their pets can have diseases, and they may come in contact with the wild animals and maybe transfer the disease. Okay, so notice how I tried to include words that were from week 6, such as habitat destruction and such as illegal hunting. Actually, diseases, I don't think was listed in the week 6 material. Okay, so maybe I should have picked a different one than diseases. I found 2 pictures. You only need 1, but your pictures have to be relevant to something that you talked about. So this picture with a hippo in the water, because I talked about the pollution and I talked about water levels being affected. There's the picture of the hippo in the kind of polluted water there. I got this picture from the WWF website. Also, here's a picture of a person with elephant tusks, so that's related to poaching. But you only need 1 picture as a minimum. You can have more if you want. You want to make it look better and all of that. And then I included the links that I used there. So that's slide number 10, an example of it. And now an example of slide number 11 about interventions. You have to have 3. So one major one I chose was that the Serengeti is classified as a World Heritage Site. That's a classification that can be given by an agency called UNESCO, which is part of the United Nations. And so if a place in the world is designated as a World Heritage Site, then it's protected. There's a lot of international protections that many countries have agreed upon, especially countries that are part of the United Nations. So that's one. Animal rehoming. This was one that I got from the WWF website. That's where they relocate an endangered species to a different area in the ecosystem where there's fewer threats and more space for it to roam around. Okay, so if there's an area where they know that animals are often victims of poaching in that area, and there's a highly endangered species there, they may try to relocate them to a different area where they do a better job of keeping the poachers away, and where there's just fewer threats in general and more space for those animals to thrive. And then I did more research other than the WWF website too, and I found that in 2010, Tanzania was planning to build a paved highway, add an extra paved highway through a section of the Serengeti, which would possibly severely affect the migration patterns of the animals. So this organization called the Africa Network for Animal Welfare actually took the country to court. Okay, so they went through the courts, and they filed their case in 2010. It actually took 4 years. So in 2014, the case was the trial, it was completed in the courts, and the country was stopped from building that highway. Okay, so I found that's the UNESCO picture. Yeah, I found a story about how they killed the controversial Serengeti highway. Now, this article, the research, how did I stumble upon this article? Well, I actually began in Wikipedia. Okay, I actually began in Wikipedia. There was a section about this highway on Wikipedia, and instead of just citing Wikipedia, oftentimes there'll be little numbers, like little tiny numbers beside pieces of information in the Wikipedia article. And those little numbers, if you scroll down, the list of all the resources that Wikipedia used, all the little numbers are listed there, and it lists what the source of information was. So I followed those links, and eventually that led me to finding this article, which I chose to use instead of the Wikipedia link. Okay, but so that link is included in my list of resources here. The link to UNESCO. I also included that there because I took their symbol as one of my pictures. I also found another news article about the highway that was stopped, and this is the picture they had, so I took that. So I included the link to that one in my speaker notes as well. All right, so that's slides 10 and 11, and only slide 12 is left. Okay, we're almost there.